Welcome everyone to our training on Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. This is a 4-part training series covering the upgrade from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. My name is Brian Nice. I am a Principal Program Manager within our Teams Engineering, Customer, and Partner team. Before we dive in, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Some additional resources include additional modules that can be found at aka.ms/Teams Academy. Additionally, we're looking for 2 types of feedback. For feedback on this session, you can go to aka.ms/Teams Community, create a new post, and add the IT Pro training tag. This will allow us to easily find your feedback for this session. If you're looking to provide feedback for various features of the Teams product itself, you can go to aka.ms/Teams Feedback. Keep in mind that Teams and Office 365 evolve constantly, so you should stay up to date on our blog at aka.ms/Teams blog. The slide also indicates the current version of this presentation. The overall agenda for this training will cover 5 areas: Microsoft Teams, the introduction to upgrade, the Teams-only experience, planning our paths to Teams, managing coexistence and interoperability, and configuring the upgrade from the admin point of view. This training will be broken into 4 separate trainings. You are currently in Part 1, Introduction to Upgrade and the Teams Experience. This training will be covering the first 2 agenda items that you see here: Microsoft Teams, Intro to Upgrade, as well as our Teams-only experience. The remaining agenda items will be covered in subsequent trainings. As we go through this training, there are some key learnings to pick up. First of which is Teams is in fact the hub for teamwork within Office 365. We also want to think from an upgrade perspective that Teams itself is more than just simply a technical migration. There is a people change element that we cannot lose sight of as part of this overall upgrade process. When we talk about Teams only mode, this refers to the experience of a user that has been upgraded from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. Meetings are always joined with their respective clients, meaning that Teams meetings will be joined by a Teams client, and Skype for Business meetings will be joined by a Skype for Business client. Let's dive into our first section on Microsoft Teams, an intro to upgrade. Microsoft Teams has the power to transform the way users get things done, acting as a hub for teamwork within our Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Now, Teams is not a direct one-to-one replacement for Skype for Business per se, but it helps us to extend the capabilities that Skype for Business would provide. This enables people to be able to connect, communicate, and collaborate from within this singular interface, thereby streamlining the way users work. As you can see throughout the slide here, there's many facets that are familiar for folks that utilize Skype for Business, such as chat and calling, managing our contacts, hosting meetings, but we also have the capability of extending the hub for teamwork environment to include collaboration on various documents, whether that's through, say, OneNote or Microsoft Word, to be able to manage our projects and work groups, perhaps with something like Planner, as well as being able to integrate with various third-party applications as well. Now, in the context of the upgrade to Microsoft Teams, we must make sure that we realize that Teams is much more than a technical migration. The people aspect of it is critically important because people themselves don't automatically change. We don't just simply adapt to change very rapidly, because resistance is a normal human behavior and it takes time to develop deep habitual usage of a particular application or platform. Now, on top of that, shadow IT is more prominent than ever. And 80% admit to using their own particular communication tool of choice, meaning they might choose to use Teams, or perhaps they choose to use some other application simply because that is the ease of use or the most prominent application that they have available, and they don't have a particular standardized approach to communications within their environment. We also need to realize that people and change are really not a one-size-fits-all type approach, right? We have folks inside of organizations that are innovators. that will jump at the latest and greatest things and be able to thrive in those types of environments. We have others that are more on the laggard side of things, where they're kind of ingrained in the tools that they use today, and maybe they're just stuck in email and that's what they use, and they're not looking to make any type of change. Then of course you have everyone in between. So we have to make sure that we don't just simply throw a lot of technical stuff at them without understanding that there's a varying degree of folks that are there to use this particular platform. Technical readiness and user readiness will go hand in hand. So as we are looking at this migration and looking at this upgrade, we need to ensure that our planning, our pilot process, our deployment process have all of these readiness activities tied together, both from the technical perspective as well as from the end user perspective. Ensuring that we have a focused effort can help drive sustained success. The slide here is showing some of the common attributes that we see across some of our most successful customers. Having a sponsorship coalition is critically important, that executive sponsor level, to ensure that we are able to drive the change that is necessary from the top down. Ensuring that we have an optimized technical environment is critically important. We want to ensure that our environment is ready for teams. From a user perspective, as we've talked about on the last slide, it's not just about the technology, but it's also about the people. Well, the people need to understand what's in it for them, right? What are the articulated user benefits that they can see? And piling onto that, what are some of the explicit use cases that our end users can see so they can understand exactly how to apply this in their daily routines? This all leads to, of course, having a very focused adoption strategy to ensure that we maintain our view of that people change aspect. You may also involve yourselves with what we call a peer champion program, where you have designated champions within the organization that are your go-to folks for this particular initiative. Devices are critically important as well, especially as we start getting into the communications aspects of a solution like Microsoft Teams, making sure that they understand and we understand how the users are using devices today. Are they using handsets? Are they using headsets and so forth? And of course, how do we operationalize all of this? We need to have a clear operational strategy to ensure that we can continue to maintain the service as it's being rolled out throughout the organization. So why should you upgrade to Microsoft Teams? And more importantly, why you should actively consider upgrading to Microsoft Teams now? Well, first and foremost, some of the features and capabilities that we have built into Microsoft Teams. There's a number of innovations that we've made within Teams, above and beyond what we were capable of doing in the Skype for Business online space. For example, as we look at our meetings platform, being able to do solutions like having our background blur, or being able to do real-time translation and transcription, right? These are all features and capabilities that are an evolution of what we had available to us in the Skype for Business world. We also continue to evolve this intelligent communications roadmap and continue to innovate in this cloud-based solution. From a user perspective, it's a more modern, more rich experience, opening up the ability for them to collaborate on multiple levels, whether it's chat, whether it's voice and video, whether it's collaboration on documents, whether it's utilizing third-party applications, right? We have all of these at our fingertips from a user experience perspective, and we have the ability to have this cross-platform, whether we're on our PC, whether we're on our Mac, whether we're on our mobile device. Right. All of this exposing us to this ability to not only do the things that we were able to do before in Skype for Business, like chat, calling, and meetings, but also being able to take advantage of the collaboration aspects, right? The team concept, being able to have the breakdowns of channels and being able to focus our attention on a particular collaboration effort, whether that be a project or whether that be an organizational group or something of that nature. And from an operational performance perspective, Teams was built on a modern infrastructure for the cloud, right? In the Skype for Business world, we kind of took what we learned and knew from the Skype for Business on-premises environment and adapted that to the cloud, which was a more monolithic type platform. But Teams is built on a modern infrastructure inside of Azure. It's built to scale to a cloud-based environment. And Teams itself helps to provide improvements in the quality and the operational metrics over Skype for Business based on how we've architected and deployed the solution. So where do we start? I'm on Skype for Business today. Where do I even begin? I want to get to Teams, great, but where do I start? A great place to start, we show over here. Well, have you even started using Teams yet? Right? Maybe you've heard about the announcements that we've made, or you've seen some blog posts, what have you, and you've just started to realize that, hey, this Teams thing looks pretty cool, but we haven't even started working on that yet. If you haven't started using Teams, you should begin by envisioning, what does teamwork look like for your organization? Once we get a better understanding of how your organization can leverage teamwork, then you can move through the process of piloting teams, deploying out teams, adopting teams, and so forth. As you notice in this particular flow, for organizations that have not even started using Teams, we're not beginning the discussion with upgrade to Teams. Well, no, because upgrading to Teams is something that we can discuss after we already understand that end destination. Right? If the organization doesn't understand how to envision teamwork or how to even use Teams, it's going to be very difficult to lead with upgrading to Teams. And if you do, you typically end up in scenarios where it becomes the one-to-one or the ever popular parity type conversation that we try to avoid because Teams is not Skype for Business. It's an evolution. Now, if you have started using Teams, as you see on the flow chart here, well, then of course you can start looking at how you plan your upgrade to Teams because you've already started to utilize Teams in your environment. Now, throughout all these phases, as you see on the right here, there is going to be a period of coexistence between Skype for Business and Teams, and we'll deep dive into that in one of our later trainings to tell you more about how these two platforms coexist together. The end state is the box that we see at the bottom here, which is our upgrade to Teams only. That's where we have transitioned all of our users and upgraded all of our users from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. So what is an upgrade? Right? We refer to it as the Teams only experience, but what does that really mean? What does that really look like? The definition of upgrade in this training is to utilize Teams for all of the various modalities that Teams can provide. This includes chat, calling, meetings, collaboration, basically everything that the Teams client is capable of providing means that you have been successfully upgraded when you're using Teams for that. This is referred to as a specific configuration or a coexistence mode that we call Teams only. Now you can see on the left-hand side here a screenshot of the Teams client showing you all of the various features and functions that are available within inside of Teams. On the right-hand side, we kind of break things down a little bit more detail so that we can see if I am an upgraded user, meaning I am utilizing Teams only, my chat and my calling, everything will be received and initiated from my Teams client. I would have the capability of being able to chat or call a previous Skype for Business user if necessary. We call that interoperability, right? And I'll talk more about that in our later trainings. And I will be redirected to Teams if I launch my Skype for Business client. The idea here is as I've been upgraded, everything is directed to Teams in this instance. Now, from a meetings perspective, we specifically are referring to the ability to schedule meetings. And when I am a Teams only user, all new meetings that I schedule will be in Microsoft Teams. I can still join Skype for Business meetings, no problem. I'll use my Skype client for that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But all new meetings that I create will always be in Teams. Data will be migrated for you as part of the upgrade process. So the contacts that you had, your buddy list, if you will, that you had in Skype for Business, including your federated contacts, will be upgraded and migrated into your Teams client. If you are migrating from on-premises Skype for Business server, we will plan to migrate your meetings as part of this process as well. Now, this is just a high-level breakdown of what upgrade is. We're going to dive deep into this as we go throughout the subsequent trainings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you are upgraded to Teams, you are in Teams only mode, but your Skype for Business client is actually still present on your machine. We don't actually remove the binaries or the bits from a machine when a user is placed into Teams only mode. However, we do take the Skype for Business client and optimize it into what we call a meetings-only client configuration. Screenshot that you see here, this is the welcome screen of a user that has launched their Skype for Business client and they have been upgraded to Microsoft Teams. So they get a notification that lets us know that the organization is now using Microsoft Teams. And then they get a couple of buttons that you see at the bottom here. Of course, we have the Go to Teams button, which will, of course, launch them into the Teams application. But they also have the Start Skype for Business button. This Start Skype for Business button will actually launch the client reduced mode or an optimized mode for meetings only. So you can see here, as I'm in the client, I see my calendar. So I'll be able to see all meetings that are available to me, whether they're Skype for Business meetings, as we see here, or whether it's a Microsoft Teams meeting. I'll have one-click join from here and be able to join the Skype meeting or join the Teams meeting. I'll also have the capability of clicking into my recent conversation here and be able to see the conversation history from my existing meetings, as well as any previous conversations that I may have had in my Skype for Business client. This is a specially adapted client specifically for the purposes of joining meetings because, as we mentioned earlier, when we are upgraded into Teams only mode, we will be able to create new meetings as Teams meetings, but when you join Skype for Business meetings, they're always joined with the Skype for Business client. A recap of the meeting scenarios that we discussed earlier. The meeting client must match the service that hosts the meeting. So for example, if it was a Skype for Business meeting, you will use a Skype for Business client to join that meeting. Likewise, if it's a Teams meeting, you will use a Teams client to join that meeting. Now, please note when we use the term client, this is indicative of all the various types of clients that are available for the particular application. So that could be a desktop client, for example, your PC or your Mac. It could be a mobile client, such as iOS or Android. It could be the browser, Edge and Chrome, if you're using Teams, or it could be the Skype meeting app in the browser if you're using Skype for Business. So when we say client, we basically mean any of those types of clients. Regardless of where the user is in their upgrade path, the users can always use either meeting client, whether they've been upgraded or not, right? So the Skype for Business user can always join a Teams meeting with the Teams client. Likewise, a Teams user can always join a Skype for Business meeting with the corresponding Skype for Business client. This is regardless of what coexistence mode has been assigned to the user. Let's take a closer look at the user experiences. If we take a look at the Skype for Business client and what happens to this client during the upgrade experience, you'll see on the left-hand side here, this is our starting point. This is what we call our no upgrade state, right? Or essentially a state where the user is just simply utilizing their Skype for Business client as they do today. We have the capability through our administrative tools to be able to turn on a notification to the user, giving them a little bit of a heads up that the upgrade is coming. That's the middle screenshot that you see here, which is indicative of this banner that indicates Skype for Business will be upgraded to Microsoft Teams. When this notification is turned on, obviously the purple banner lights up for the end user, but it also exposes a Try It button. In the background, we're actually downloading the Teams application and getting it installed on their machine such that if they do click the Try It button, they'll actually have a Teams application to use. The screenshot that you see on the right should look familiar. This is the screenshot that we show for a user when they launch their Skype for Business client after they have been successfully upgraded to Teams. In this instance, again, as we noted, we're showing you from a splash screen perspective that you have been upgraded to Teams, giving them a one-click option to get to the Teams application, but also giving them the Start Skype for Business option that will allow them to open the optimized meetings mode client for Skype for Business. Now, in this stage, also, the Outlook meeting add-in will be removed from a Skype perspective and replaced with the Teams meeting add-in. And the integrations with Office, that is the presence bubbles that we see with inside of Outlook, for example, and the ability to hover over a contact and start a chat, those will be replaced with Teams. Let's take a deeper look at the Windows desktop. When we have a user that is in the Teams only experience and they launch their Skype for Business client, we will see the splash screen that you see on the left-hand side here, indicating that our org is now using Teams. This meetings only or optimized version of the Skype for Business client basically focuses the user specifically on their meetings. So if I tap on this little meetings pivot here, I'll be able to see all of my meetings that are available, both Skype for Business and Teams, and be able to perform my one-click join as necessary from this particular view. Additionally, if I were to click on the tab for conversation history, I will be able to see all of my conversation history here. This not only includes my meeting conversation history, but it would also include any chat conversation history that I had prior to being upgraded to Microsoft Teams. When we look at this on the Mac, it's a very, very similar experience to what we saw on the PC. Again, on the left-hand side, we have our screen that lets us know that we are utilizing Teams with the option to launch either the Teams application or the optimized Skype for Business client. Middle section shows us, as we look into our Meetings tab, the meetings that are available on our calendar. Again, either Skype for Business and or Teams will show up here, allowing the user to continue to do their one-click join from this particular screen. And they will have the option of clicking on the chat app that you see here, again, to be able to see any previous conversation history, whether that's previous conversation history in their Skype client prior to them being upgraded, or this is where the meeting chat would show up as well for users that continue to join legacy Skype for Business meetings. Speaking of the meeting join experience, what happens when I join a Skype for Business meeting, but I'm in my Teams client? So take a look here on the left-hand side. This is my Teams application. I'm looking at my calendar for the day, and I see there happens to be a meeting for me to join. In this case, I simply click the join button, not really paying too much attention to what type of meeting this is. I'm just conditioned to see, hey, it's a meeting and I join it. But if you actually look a little bit further down the body, you see that this is a Skype for Business meeting. Well, when I click the join button here, remember that the meeting type is the meeting client that you'll use. So even though I'm in my Teams application here, this is a Skype for Business meeting, such that when I join it, I will join it utilizing the Skype for Business full client. This is assuming that the user actually has the Skype for Business client installed on their machine. They will join it through the full desktop application. If they don't have the full application installed, they'll be redirected out to the web, where they can download the Skype Meetings app and use the Skype Meetings app version. Now, why would you want to use one over the other? Well, there are some features that are available in the full desktop client, such as client-side recording, for example, that are not currently available in the Skype meeting app. So that might be why you may want users to use that full Skype for Business client that is in the optimized meeting mode. The experience of joining a Skype for Business meeting for a Teams-only user from Outlook is very similar to what we saw joining the meeting from the Teams client. In this example, I'm showing the particular meeting details from in Outlook, but this could also be from the reminder dialog that were to pop up from Outlook's perspective as well. And here you see I have the hyperlink to join the Skype meeting. Well, as I click that, again, even though this user is upgraded to Teams, this is a Skype meeting, thus it must be joined with a Skype client. They'll be directed to use their full client if it is installed on their machine, and again, that's the optimized meetings mode version of the client. Or if the application's not present, we'll direct them over to the web, give them the one-time download and install of the Skype Meetings app, and allow them to join from there. If I'm on a mobile device, for example, an iOS device, when I first launched the Skype for Business application after having been upgraded to Microsoft Teams, I'll see a screen similar to this, again indicating that I am now using Microsoft Teams with a nice Go to Teams button. But I also have the option, much like we saw on the desktop side, to start the Skype for Business application in the optimized meetings mode. Here you see a screenshot of the optimized meeting mode, again, similar to what we saw on the desktop side, where I can see my upcoming meetings, as well as be able to see my recent conversation history. If I were to click on the calendar in the upper right, this would take me to the detailed view of my meetings, again allowing me to see all the meetings that I have for the day, including both Skype for Business as well as Microsoft Teams meetings. You can see the same thing from within your Teams application as well if you happen to launch the Teams app and move to the calendar pivot. Now, from either of these views, I can simply click Join. One tap join and away we go. You know, this works the same from Outlook meeting invites or whatever mail client you're using as well. I've omitted that off the slide just for space purposes, but you will have the one tap join option available to you even on mobile. So if I were to tap either from my Skype client or from my Teams application, the join button, this is a Skype for Business meeting, I will be joined straight into that particular meeting utilizing the Skype for Business mobile app. Now, the advantage here, I am actually connected to the Skype for Business meeting as my authenticated user because I did in fact launch the Skype app. I signed into it and I'm using this optimized meetings mode version of the client. So now it's just business as usual for me inside of this Skype for Business meeting on my mobile application. If I tap the chat icon in the upper right, this will allow me to see and participate in the chat conversations that are happening within this Skype for Business meeting. Again, same as we had done prior to the upgrade happening. When my meeting is finished, you'll notice that I get redirected back into the optimized version, the meeting mode version of the Skype mobile application, and I actually can see my meeting chat history available, in this case, under my recent pivot. Now, as we look at having both the Skype for Business client and the Teams clients available within an organization, we may inevitably end up in a situation where we require what we call interoperability. Quick definition, interoperability is having a Teams user that is using their Teams application chat and call with a Skype for Business user that is utilizing the Skype for Business application. All of this happening within your same organization, within your tenant. So in this particular example, this is a Teams client that is being used by Adele. She is actually talking right now with Enrico. Enrico, in this case, is using his Skype for Business client, and we indicate this by what I've highlighted on this slide, both the text under his name, indicating that he's using Skype, as well as the little Skype icon that we see right here next to his name. This indicates that this particular user or this conversation is an interop conversation. Now, why is that important? Well, we call it out here in the text. Some Microsoft Teams features won't be available when a Teams user is talking to a Skype for Business user. For example, if I look at the chat, it's about as simple and basic as it gets, right? If you're used to using Teams, you may recall we see things down here like the ability to do emoticons or Giphies or various other messaging compose extensions and so forth. We don't have any of those available when we have an interop chat conversation between a Teams user and a Skype for Business user. Now, if I look at it from Enrico's side, he is utilizing his Skype for Business client and he's chatting with Adele. Now, he's looking from Skype and he will actually get a little banner that indicates to him that Adele is also not using Skype for Business and that for a richer experience, it would be advisable for Enrico to switch over to Teams or perhaps start up a Skype meeting so that we can overcome any limitations that we may have in this particular interop experience. From a calling perspective, interoperability is very similar to the experience that we see with chat. Again, in this example, this is a Teams client signed into with Adele, and she is talking to Enrico. She's already established an audio call. This could be an audio call, it could be an audio video call, but she's established this peer-to-peer call with Enrico. And we give some hints in the UI that indicate to the particular user, in this case Adele, that this is in fact a user that's using Skype for Business. As such, some Microsoft Teams features will not be readily available. For example, You can see here that the ability to share a desktop is currently not available from the Teams side. If we take a look at what it looks like from Enrico's Skype client, Enrico is talking to Adele here, and also, like we saw with chat, gets a notification banner that indicates that Adele is not using Skype for Business. As a result, if we want a richer experience, we may need to switch to Teams or alternatively start a Skype meeting. Now, there are some limitations that we have in the interop scenarios between a Teams user and a Skype for Business user, but we do have some built-in workarounds that are currently available. For example, let's take a look at the scenario where Adele is communicating with Enrico. Adele is utilizing Teams. The screenshot that you see here, this is Enrico's Skype for Business client, and he's currently established an audio call with Adele. He does have the little banner indicating that Adele's not using Skype for Business. But at this point, as the discussion continues, Enrico decides that he wants to share his desktop. So the Skype user, which is Enrico in this case, does what he's always done and clicks the little share icon and chooses to share his desktop. At this point, the Skype client realizes that the user on the other side of the conversation is not using Skype for Business, they're using Teams. And as such, we're not going to be able to make this work in a peer-to-peer scenario. So as a result, Enrico's Skype for Business client will automatically and transparently start a Skype meeting in the background and will move the conversation into the Skype meeting. We will then send a meeting link over the chat channel from Enrico over to Adele so that she can then click on the link and join that particular meeting with her corresponding Skype for Business client. So looking at the screenshot here, this is Adele's Teams client. And you can see, as I've highlighted here in the red box, Enrico is using Skype for Business and has started screen sharing. To do this, you'll need to join the Skype meeting by clicking on this particular hyperlink. That would then launch Adele out into her Skype client, desktop sharing would continue, and Enrico would be able to share all the relevant information that he would want to share as part of this desktop sharing experience. To recap the key learnings that we had from this training, Teams is the hub for teamwork within Office 365. In the context of the upgrade, Teams is much more than a technical migration. There's also a people change aspect that is critical to the upgrade process. The Teams only mode refers to the experience of a user that has been upgraded from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. And meetings are always joined with their respective clients. So a Teams meeting will be joined with a Teams client, and a Skype for Business meeting will be joined with a Skype for Business client. Be sure to check out the other trainings that are part of this series of the Skype to Teams upgrade. Thank you for attending this session.